Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Mr. Nerman, you may continue. Before you do that, ladies and gentlemen, did any of you hear or see anything about this case on the media since I last asked you that question? Has anyone tried to speak with you or influence you in any way about this case? I see no hands to either question. Thank you, Mr. Nerman. You may now continue with redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Arias, before we broke for lunch, we were talking about the discussion you were having with Mr. Alexander after you found him making out with this girl. Do you recall that this morning?
Yes.
Okay. And I believe your words were, in prior testimony, something to the effect that you wanted to understood where you stood in terms of the relationship. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you also mentioned on direct examination, you said that he was still, I believe your word was courting you, right?
Yes.
Okay. What do you mean at this time period that Mr. Alexander was still courting you? What do you mean by that?
Well, after we broke up, he promised he would change, and, you know, he wanted me to move down there, so he paid for me to move down there. And so he would still take me out. We'd go on dates and that kind of thing. He wanted to spend his birthday with me. So those are just things that I felt we were kind of just testing the water to see if maybe we could trust each other again or that kind of thing. So when I saw him, I mean, I knew we were still like not together, still single, but when I saw him with that girl, I thought maybe I should ask if he is dating someone else and just hasn't told me, or find out what the status is so that I can find out where I stand.
Okay. And this conversation you had with him about questioning him where you stood in the greater scheme of things, that is what led him to run up and beat his head against the wall? Is this the same conversation? Or
Well, that wasn't the part. It was the part where I reminded him about how he said I could come over last night, and it, like a flash of realization, crossed his face, and I think he just, I mean, I don't know what he was thinking, but I could tell after that part he changed. He got upset.
Okay. And I'm a little confused then, because when you went to have a soup pie, you had told us that, we heard on cross-examination about this backpack and supposedly full of makeup, and that you and Travis were having a fight about that. Do you recall being asked about that on cross-examination?
Yes.
Okay. And the other issue there was that you had told us in prior testimony that there was a fight going on in the bathroom, or bedroom bathroom, behind closed doors that Mr. Dan Freeman wasn't privy to. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. And this argument, if I recall correctly, related to your interaction with John Dixon. Is that correct?
Yes, it did. He read about that interaction in my journal.
Okay. So, and refresh our memory, if you could briefly, what interaction are we talking about?
I went, at one point, it was right before convention, so it would have been maybe late August. I drove out to, I think it was Irvine, and hung out with John. We just hung out, spent the weekend together, traded files, music files, movie files.
Okay.
Went to the beach, went to dinner, that kind of thing. Watched a movie.
Well, I'm a little confused, though. Why was it okay for Travis to be making out with this girl and for you not to be seen or not to hang out with John Dixon?
Well, I was under the impression at the time that it wasn't because I was hanging out with another guy, but because of who the guy was. So that's what I believed then, but the same pattern continued. with other guys also.
Okay. And who the guy was is because, at least at this point in time when you were in Irvine with him, he was not a church member. I believe that's what you told us earlier, correct?
He was not a church member. Yes, his grandfather was a member of the church, married outside the church, so his children and grandchildren, which would also be John, were not church members.
Okay. And this girl that he was making out with, was her status as a church member ever verified?
I didn't ask.
I guess that means no, huh?
No. Yes, that means no.
Okay.
What's he asking about the,
Approach, please. May continue.
This girl that Travis was making out with, was it ever asserted that it was okay, don't worry about it because she's a church member?
No, that was never discussed.
Now, the issue of your sex life with Travis came about in a lot of different ways throughout this case. One of the things that was discussed last week when Mr. Martinez spoke to you is this idea that maybe before he met you, that Mr. Alexander was a virgin. Do you remember being asked about that?
Yes.
objection, counsel, she was never asked that.
Approach, please. You may continue.
Remind us again, in terms of the sexual behavior you engaged in with Mr. Alexander, what was the first occasion of sexual interaction?
The weekend following convention
Okay, and where did that take place?
at his friend's house in Marietta.
And if I remember correctly, that was oral sex.
Yes.
If it's possible for you to make conclusions like this, based on this sexual interaction, were you of the mindset that Mr. Alexander had no sexual experience prior to this encounter?
No, I was not, based on that interaction and other things he told me prior to it.
So he never led you to believe that he was a virgin through his words?
Objection, yes.
No, if anything, he led me to believe the exact opposite.
The exact opposite being what?
He had more sexual partners than I've had, but might have been over a longer range of time.
Okay. You also mentioned somewhere down the road after that first sexual encounter, let me ask you, the second sexual encounter, that was the oral sex in your car, correct?
That's correct.
Did he do anything during that encounter that led you to believe that maybe this wasn't his first rodeo, so to speak?
Objection. She has already indicated that they already had sex, so, I mean, relevance is the objection. Approach, please.
Questions, Arias?
Yes.
So, did he do anything to make you believe that this wasn't his first encounter of this nature?
Yes, he flipped the visor down and angled the mirror so he could have an additional visual vantage point.
Okay. You also mentioned during your testimony that there was a time when Mr. Alexander performed oral sex on you, and your testimony was, I believe, something to the effect that he knew what he was doing. Is that right?
Yes.
And without getting too graphic, if you will, what gave you that impression?
Well, he had bragged about it prior to that. somewhat, that he had studied the female anatomy. And so even though I wasn't expecting things to go that far that night, once they did, it was obvious to me that he knew what he was doing. I mean, I've had other intimate relationships in the past, so I was able to make a comparison in my mind.
Okay. Now, was there ever a point in time that he ever compared your sexual skills with those of other women?
Objection yields.
Approach, please. Overruled.
Do you remember the question?
Yes. The answer is yes.
Okay. Yes, meaning he did compare your sexual skills to those of other women.
Yes.
Objection, that's the answer. Leading.
Overruled. That answer will stand.
Did he ever compare parts of your anatomy to those of other women?
Objection yields.
Overruled. You being answer yes or no?
Yes, he does on the sex tape.
Okay. Now, you brought up the sex tape. That's a reference to the phone call you recorded at his behest on May 10th, 2008?
Yes.
Okay. A lot was brought up there, so before we get into that a little more specifically, I want to talk about your prior sexual history, because that was talked about a little bit during your cross-examination. Do you remember that?
Yes.
One of the issues that came up is your history, if you will, for lack of a better word, with anal sex. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And one of your partners, one of your first relationships, we heard throughout your testimony, was with someone named Bobby Juarez, right?
That's right.
Okay. And in fact, there was a point in time where you were living with him and sexually active with him, right?
Yes.
Okay. And if memory serves, you would have been about 17.
Yes, I was almost 18.
Okay. And he was a few years older than you?
Yes, 3 years older than me.
Okay. One of the things that came up was the idea that you had engaged in anal sex with Mr. Juarez. Do you remember talking about that with Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Okay. In this regard, was this anal sex something you did on a frequent basis with Mr. Juarez?
No, it was something we tried once, maybe twice. I think just once.
Okay, something that you tried once or twice throughout the course of your entire relationship.
Yes.
Okay. And as it relates to Matt McCartney, that would have been your next significant relationship. I believe, if I understood you correctly, you testified that you never had anal sex with Matt McCartney. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And as it relates to Mr. Brewer, a 3.5 to 4 year relationship, right?
Yes.
Was there anal sex involved in that relationship?
I want to say one time, I think, maybe twice, but I can only remember one specifically.
So based on that, it was certainly not a regular part of your repertoire with Mr. Brewer, right?
Definitely not.
Okay. And Mr. Brewer would have been the sexual partner that directly preceded Mr. Alexander, right?
Yes.
Okay. So at the time, and just for clarity's sake, you had had these relationships with these men. Are these Mr. Brewer and Mr. Juarez? Are they the only people you ever, prior to Mr. Alexander, had anal intercourse with?
Yes.
Okay. So based on what you've told us in your testimony, before you met Travis in your sexual history, you would have had anal sex no more than 4 times. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Okay. Now, when you started engaging in sexual activity with Mr. Alexander, we've heard how part of that included anal sex, correct?
Yes. Well, not in the beginning.
Right, not the beginning, but we heard about the first instance, of anal sex occurring after your baptism, right?
That's right.
Okay. And that was not anything you would ask for, right? Is that anything you asked for?
No, I didn't ask for that.
Was lubrication used during this encounter?
Not to my knowledge. I think he might have spit on his hand, but I didn't see. I just kind of was going with what I was hearing.
Okay. And you described this encounter as being painful to you, if I recall. Is that right? Was this a painful encounter for you?
Yes, it was painful that time.
Now, I ask that because one of the things that you talked about with Mr. Martinez is your sex life with Mr. Alexander. And you had said a comment that you enjoyed it, it was mutual. Something to that effect on several different occasions. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Objection, relevance as to why he's asking it. He said, I asked this because relevance.
Sustained.
You made comments about enjoying your sex life with Mr. Alexander and saying that it was mutual. Do you remember doing that?
Yes.
Okay. When you talk about enjoying it, was that physically enjoying it?
Yes, it was physical. Most of the time, yes.
Sometimes or all the time?
Not all the time, but more than sometimes.
There were some instances, though, as you just told us, that it was painful, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That painful interaction on the day of your baptism, was that enjoyable to you? And on any level?
That particular segment was not enjoyable at all.
You also mentioned that there were times, you just testified that there were times that it wasn't, physically pleasurable. On those times when it wasn't physically pleasurable, did you get something else out of it?
Yes, I did.
What was that?
It made me feel good to make him feel good, and also when I was making him feel good, he had all of his attention focused on me, so I feel like it was still, like a trade-off kind of. I mean, like, I liked the way I felt when he was focused on me that way, and I liked the way I felt when I could make him feel good, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, let's try to make a little more sense out of that with one of the encounters. You told us that there were occasions when you would come out onto the porch, nude, perform oral sex upon him, and he would ejaculate on your face. You remember
Yes.
telling us about that?
Yes.
Okay. Was that physically pleasurable to you?
I wouldn't say there was any physical pleasure that I derived from it.
So talking about what you told us just a moment ago, what kind of pleasure did you get out of it? Is that the pleasure of pleasing him? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, it had been a fantasy he'd had for over a year that I had known him, and so it was something that we hadn't fulfilled in the past, and we're able to do it now based on the configuration of the porch of the house that I lived in.
Okay. You also, when you were asked about this sex you had with Travis, you made the comment on direct that you felt like a used piece of toilet paper. Do you recall that?
Yes, that was that one time during my baptism. or
During your
after.
baptism. But there was also kind of maybe not that exact comment, but a similar comment you made when you were driving home from Ehrenberg. Do you remember that?
Yes.
What was your mindset there in terms of the sexual activity?
Well, my mindset didn't really develop until after a few days of him not contacting me or returning any of my attempts to contact him. I drove away kind of with a little bit of a sinking feeling because he wasn't very affectionate when we parted, just kind of blah, just sort of checked out. So I thought maybe he's just tired. And just as the days began to go by, the whole weekend went by, and I didn't hear from him until Tuesday night. So by that point, I thought that I'd just been really dumb.
And that was, and I think I used the wrong explanation. That, I believe, you testified to that you felt used like a prostitute on that occasion, right?
It kind of reminded me of that, yes.
But you weren't feeling that way while the activity was taking place, but only afterwards when you were driving home. Is that?
Yes, after I just sort of reflected on it and how it all came about.
Okay. Now, it seems all this continued sexual interaction after you broke up, and even after in January of 2008, was motivated, based on what you've told us, on two things. There was a sexual component to it. Is that accurate? A physical component to it, I should say.
Will you start over? I'm sorry.
Sure. The sexual activity you had with Mr. Alexander after you broke up, that continued all the way until June 4th, there was a physically gratifying component of that on most occasions, right?
Yes.
And there was a seemingly always, whether it was physically gratifying to you or not, an emotionally satisfying component to you for making him happy. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Was there any other reasons why you continued to have sexual relations with him after you broke up?
Well, after I walked in on him,
She was asked were there any other reasons.
She's explaining the reasons, Judge.
Explain the reasons.
okay. There weren't any other reasons prior to January 21st, 2008, but there were after that. And the reason was I was under the impression that he felt more satiated and he felt more normal when he had just more adult interactions, if that makes sense.
So there was a component of assistance, if you will, in your sexual activity, assisting Travis.
I would say that. I wasn't looking at it that way, but it was much like that, yes.
Moving ourselves to the tape. Well, before we get to the tape, let's talk about some of the text messages without going through the specifics of them, but there were several things that were brought up in these text messages, things that you said. You made the comment in the text message that you wanted to have sex with him like a horny little schoolgirl. Do you remember being shown that message?
Yes.
And if you could speak up.
Yes.
Why would you send a message like that to him? What was the purpose?
Well, the schoolgirl thing was one of his fantasies, and it only shows the two messages, but that was a long thread of back and forth on my way back from Las Vegas while I was driving. And so it just kept escalating, and that's when he sent me another picture of himself, and we just kept trying to top ourselves, so we were trying to get more and more graphic and explicit.
Well, in that regard, though, was that the idea of the schoolgirl in the outfit, was that something that you were interested in, or was it something you were doing to please him?
It would be more for his pleasure, because just being with him was enough for me, but he enjoyed that kind of stuff, so yeah.
Okay. So, in terms of your sex life prior to Mr. Alexander, you didn't dress up as a schoolgirl.
No, I didn't dress up as anything prior to him.
Okay. You also made the comment in some of these text messages that you wanted to give him a blowjob. BJ, which is probably what you put in the text messages. Why did you send him text messages to that effect?
Well, we just had a sex life and it just kept things interesting.
Okay. Why was it important to you for things to stay interesting?
It depends on the timeline. But I enjoyed spending time with him, and usually the only times that we spent together where it was enjoyable was when he was focused on me in that sort of manner. Usually after that, it would be if we were in public spending time together, we weren't really doing anything or interacting in any sort of pleasant way. And if we were not engaging in intimate things and we were alone together, then sometimes we were just fighting. So it was more pleasant to be loving, I guess, for lack of a better word.
And it sounds like you engaged in these sexual encounters so you could get love and affection back from Mr. Alexander. Is that what you're telling us?
Yes,
Are you telling us that you were willing to pay this price in order to get this affection from Mr. Alexander?
Overruled.
I wouldn't term it like that, but when I did,
Objection would be also the question, yes or no, did she?
You wouldn't put it like that. How would you put it?
I would just put it as spending time with him. That's how I looked at it, spending time with him, doing things that he liked to do, where I received a good reaction from him. So in turn, I like to do those things too, for those reasons.
Okay. In those text messages that you were shown, you also make reference to, wanting a facial, to, his penis being a lollipop. Were you doing that along the same reasons that we were talking about before, to get his approval or to keep it interesting for him?
Objection, meeting.
Sustained.
Why did you make comments of that nature in the text messages?
Well, again, with those particular text messages, we were trying to top each other. We kept going back and forth. It got more and more graphic, more and more explicit. And we were trying to just be witty, so every time I topped his comment, he tried to top mine, and it was something that we did back and forth on a few occasions, more than a few occasions, but that was just part of our relationship. So that's how we interacted at times.
And you got positive reinforcement from those texts as well, is that fair to say?
Yes, I did.
Judge, can we approach?
Gentlemen, please go back to the jury room for a few minutes. Probably will be 10 to 15 minutes. Please remember the admonition. You are excused.
Please stand for the jury.
The record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated. Mr. Nurmi, you may continue outside the presence of the jury.
Problem being right now, the system seems to be,
It's rebooting. Take just a second.
The way you know, it sounds like you're this 12-year-old girl having her first orgasm. It's so hot.
It sounds like what?
A 12-year-old girl having her first orgasm. I jack off every day, sometimes 2-3 times a day.
Are you serious?
There's been many times when you've been like miserable and I've like raped you. You cannot say I don't work that booty.
Oh, never mind. You do know how to work the booty.
Yeah, we've had 2 and 3 hour sessions many times.
Yeah.
I think 3.5 is like our top or something.
You remember that time I came to visit you when I was still working in California? And I fell asleep on your chair next to your bed. And you just like woke me up by pulling my pants off and totally licking my pussy.
Yeah. You gotta admit though, like there's not many guys that would do that just for fun. I'm gonna tie you to a tree and put it in your ass, by the way.
What's that?
I'm gonna tie you to a tree and put it in your ass. I'm going to zip tie your arms around the tree, blindfold you, and put the camera on a timer while I'm parking you. Just think of how I pounded you with a full 50-year-old pop until it was nothing. I didn't like the pop rock as much as I liked the 50-year-old pop, though. Like, you ride my freaking face. Go horse.
Yeah.
You get some 69 picks, too.
69 pics?
I'm going to get some great shots of freaking put that in you. Like, the actual putting it in you and, like, your reaction and just the angles and the whole bit. Seriously, honey, I want to you right now for that. Because I'm touching yourself. I can't wait to get pictures of jizzle on your face. I'll try to get one as I'm coming on your face. I want to give you a cream pie, too.
What's that? What's a cream pie?
So I blow my wad right, just like a quarter inch inside your pussy. I mean, it's gonna be like legitimate porn
Yeah.
in every sense. You know what I mean? Everything about like the details of your body are so hot. Like those big, freaking nipples. I could come at any moment. From my dick and area orifice of your body. Because I want to get like some like park ranger type outfit for me to wear. Oh, honey, the pictures I'm gonna take, they're so hot. Like one of them's gonna be me laying on my back, cock hard, you know, sticking straight out. But we'll take some video too. Oh yeah, it's huge. I just did like 15 pumps. Which is surprising because, you know, I drank it this morning. Seriously, I could, if I was in a sperm bank, I could have retired off this load.
Counsel. will be Exhibit 509. Yes. right, let's bring in the jury.
And did you say around 3:25?
Yes.
Okay.
Take a break at 3:20.
Sure.
Please stand for the jury.
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. While you were in the jury room, the court admitted Exhibit 509. Exhibit 509 is a portion of Exhibit 460. In a few moments, defense counsel will play Exhibit 509 for you. As it is being played, you will see words appear on the screen. It is up to you to determine the accuracy of the words you see on the screen as you listen to the recording. The exhibit admitted and the exhibit that will go with you back to the jury room will not have the words on it. Those words are being provided at this time to assist you as you listen to the portions of Exhibit 460. Are there any questions? Mr. Nermi, you may continue.
Ms. Arias, as it relates to Exhibit 460, you were here in court when that was played, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you recall being asked some questions about fantasy and reality as it relates to this tape. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. What I want to do for you now is play some snippets of the tape and ask you some questions. If you could just watch as we go.
Okay.
The way you know, it sounds like you're this 12-year-old girl having her first orgasm. It's so hot.
Can you see that quote on the screen?
Yes.
Was that something that you wanted him to say or encouraged him to say?
I didn't encourage him to say it.
Is it something you wanted him to say?
I just wanted him to say what he wanted to say. I didn't get specific.
Okay. And going back to the question of fantasy or reality for him, do you know if this was fantasy or reality?
Well,
Objection is a yes or no question.
Sustained.
Do you know if it's fantasy or reality? Or if you don't know, you don't know.
I don't know. I think it was fantasy.
Objection, she said she doesn't know anything else.
Sustained.
You weren't 12 at the time of this phone call, were you?
No.
Okay. Fantasy or reality is kind of gross either way, isn't it?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Let's move on to the next highlight.
Sounds like what?
A 12-year-old girl had her first orgasm. I jack off every day, sometimes 2-3 times a day.
Are you serious?
There's been many times when you've been like miserable and I've like raped you.
You were asked about, going back to the previous clip, you were asked about his masturbation habits or that you inspired them. Did you somehow dictate how often he masturbated?
No.
He also says there have been many times when you have been miserable, and I've like raped you. Is that fantasy or is that reality?
That's reality, but he doesn't mean like rape, like how the law defines it. I don't think.
Did you have fantasies about being raped by Mr. Alexander?
Not rape, just maybe like ravished or something, but not raped, I would say.
Let's move on.
You cannot say I don't work that booty.
Oh, never mind. You do know how to work the booty.
Yeah, we've had 2 and 3 hour sessions many times.
Yeah.
This 2-hour, 3-hour sessions, is that a reference to the reality of your sex life with him prior to May 10th, 2008?
Yes, prior to moving back to California.
And in those 2 and 3-hour sessions, based on what you told us before, you enjoyed most of those physically, but also because of the fact that you were making him happy. Is that right?
Objection, leading.
Is it accurate that part of the reason for these sessions was not only the physical satisfaction, but the positive attention you got from him during those times?
Same objection, leading.
Sustained.
You get positive attention from him during those 2 or 3 hours?
Yes, I did.
And you enjoyed that positive attention, right?
Objection, leading.
Overruled, you may answer.
Yes, always.
I think 3.5 winter.
You remember that time I came to visit you when I was still living in California? And I fell asleep on your chair next to your bed. And you just like woke me up by pulling my pants off and totally licking my pussy.
Yeah. That's, you gotta admit though, like, there's not many guys that would do that just for fun. I'm gonna tie you to a tree and put it in your ass, by the way.
As it relates to the previous clip, the fact that Mr. Alexander wanted to perform oral sex on you for such a lengthy period of time, was that something that made you feel good?
Objection, as soon as I saw it happen. He woke her up that way, not 2 or 3 hour session.
Sustained.
Okay, when he woke you up and you were asleep, you weren't conscious and consenting to that activity. Is that correct?
Objection, leading.
Rephrased.
You were asleep the time he referred to just in that call, right? You were asleep when you took your pants off.
Yes, I woke up in the process. I was sleeping.
And because you were asleep, you didn't consent to him doing any of those things before you woke up. Is that accurate?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Would it be fair to say that you didn't consent to anything because you were asleep?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
When you're asleep, can people talk to you and ask you questions, yes or no? You would answer them if you're asleep?
Not if I'm actually sleeping. Maybe
Okay.
I would.
So when you were asleep on this chair, did Miss Alexander say, hey, Jodi, can I take your pants off and have oral sex with you?
Objection like a foundation. She was asleep. How would she know?
That's my point.
Do me answer.
Did you ask if I would know? Or?
No, I asked, did Travis say to you while you were sleeping, hey, Jodi, can I take your pants off and perform oral sex?
No.
Well, objection.
So,
Objection. Same objection. He has no foundation.
it was already
Overruled. You may proceed.
Were you flattered by the fact that he wanted to do that to you for that long?
Objection mischaracterizes the evidence like a foundation. Do that what? For that what long?
Sustained as to foundation.
Okay, Jodi, were you flattered by the fact that he wanted to perform oral sex upon you for a long period, the 2 to 3 hour period of time, or the long period of time he talked about in the tape?
Objection. Comment on the question. Is he asking 2 or 3 hours or in the tape?
Well, I don't think that particular time was 2 or 3 hours, but of course I was flattered. He wanted to surprise me, I think, but yeah, I was flattered. I was kind of embarrassed, but I was flattered.
Okay. Now, moving to this next quote. I'm going to tie you to a tree and put it in your ass, by the way. We heard about prior instances of anal sex prior to May 10th. So is this fantasy or is this reality?
We're kicking around ideas of what we might do. I hope that was fantasy because I don't think I would have gone for that, but I'm not sure whether or not he had serious intentions of doing that act or not.
Did you ever, you said you don't think you would submit to that, but did you ever do anything to try to make this fantasy happen?
Yes.
What did you do?
He asked me to find a place that would be good where we could do that, and so I hiked around a little bit and thought it was near this park that's mostly wooded toward the south end of town. And I figured I was trying to think of the best time so that, it's kind of in public so that nobody would stumble upon us. So just that, basically.
Okay. So this might have been one of those fantasies that might have become a reality.
Objection leading speculations.
Let's go on to the next quote.
I'm going to tie you to a tree and put it in your ass. I was going to zip tie your arms around the tree, blindfold you, and put the camera on a timer while I'm parking there. Just think of how I pounded you with a full 50-roll pop until it was nothing.
The quote we just heard, I was a little late on hitting the pause button, but the quote we just heard about Tootsie Pops, that was a reference to the encounter, the day that Mr. Alexander, you and Mr. Alexander took a bath, and that was used later on.
Objection leading for more than one occasion when they engaged in this conduct.
Continue your question.
Is The day you used the Tootsie Pop, is that also the day you took a bath with Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
There was much discussion last week when Mr. Martinez was speaking with you about whether you enjoyed that encounter or not. And I believe you said that you had enjoyed aspects of that encounter. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay. Which aspects did you enjoy?
Well, I think we used bubbles that time with the bath, so I enjoyed that. I guess the Tootsie Pop was just for fun. I enjoyed his attention. I didn't really like the Pop Rocks as much, how he wanted to use them. So that was probably one of the 2 or 3 hour things he was talking about, because
Okay.
it lasted a while.
Well, to clarify then what you were asked on cross-examination, when he was using the Tootsie Pops on you, you weren't enjoying that physically, you were enjoying the attention you were getting from him. Is that correct?
Objection leading.
When he was using the Tootsie Pops on you, was it physically pleasurable to you?
There was some physical pleasure, I guess. It wasn't uncomfortable or anything.
What other pleasure did you derive from that?
His attention, I guess. It sounds simple, but it was just about us, we shut the door and it was our own space and it was just our time together. So I enjoyed that.
Okay.
I didn't like the Pop Rock as much as I liked the Tootsie Roll Pop, though. Like, you could ride my freaking face. Go horse.
Yeah.
You get some 69 picks, too.
69 picks?
I'm going to get some great shots. I'll freaking put that in here. Like the action.
Talks about getting some great shots, putting it in you. What's that a reference to?
Sex.
What is he putting in you? May be obvious, but what?
His penis.
And some great shots there. What is he referring to? Are we talking about taking pictures? Are we talking about making a video?
He's talking about the photographs at this point with his new camera that he was excited about.
As it relates to taking nude photographs, is that something that you were completely comfortable with and encouraged?
I was never completely comfortable with the nude photographs, but I was willing to. It took a while, it took, I guess, close to 1.5 years, but I was willing to go along with it. As long as it got deleted.
Well, putting it in you and like the reaction and just the angles and the whole bit. Seriously, honey, I want to course you right now for that. Because I'm touching yourself. I can't wait to get pictures of jizzle on your face.
That, and let me see if I can progress a little bit.
Try to get one as I'm covering up your face.
This particular act of him ejaculating on your face was mentioned a couple times in these slides. Is that something that you got physical enjoyment out of?
Not like physical pleasure. actually. Sometimes it hurt if it got in my eyes, but other than that, it wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't, like my preferred method or anything.
If you didn't get physical pleasure out of it, what, if anything, did you get out of it?
Just it made me feel good to know that he was enjoying himself. If he was gratified, I felt better about myself, that I was able to provide that gratification for him.
Continue on.
I want to give you a cream pie, too.
What's that? What's a cream pie?
Prior to Mr. Alexander, explaining this cream pie to you, did you know what it was? What he was talking about?
No, I didn't know what that term meant.
What I want, right? Just like a quarter inch inside your pussy. I mean, it's gonna be like legitimate porn.
Having him give you this cream pie and making quote unquote legitimate porn, was that something you were willing to do to please him?
I was willing to do that.
To please him?
Yes, certainly.
Did you have some independent desire on your own to make this porn?
Well, not photographing it or filming it or recording it or anything like that.
Okay.
No, not like that.
Yeah.
In every sense, you know what I mean? Everything about, like, the details of your body are so hot. Like those big.
Comments like that of a sexual nature about your body, did those make you feel good?
Yeah, they made me feel good.
Freaking nipples. I keep coming anymore. From my dick and every orifice of your body. Because I want to get like some like park ranger type outfit for me to wear. I'll tell you, the pictures I'm going to take, they're so hot. Like one of them's going to be me laying on my back, cock hard, sticking.
Again, going back to these, one of them, is he referring to pictures?
Yes, different positions.
And again, you said you were uncomfortable and getting more comfortable with this, is that correct? Or
I was getting accustomed to the idea of doing it.
So we'll take some video too.
were you comfortable with video?
I'm kind of self-conscious in front of the lens, but I was willing to try it as long as it got deleted. I was okay with that.
Oh, yeah, it's huge. I just did like 15 pumps. Which is surprising because, I drank it this morning. Seriously, I could,
The fact that you were able to make him, by his words, reach orgasm, we'll put it that way, did that make you feel good about yourself?
Yeah, I got satisfaction from doing that.
to retire off this love.
Okay. There was well, there was an issue raised about fidelity and you kissing Ryan Burns on June 5th. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And do you recall the testimony of Miss Diodone, Lisa Diodone, then Lisa Andrews, that she was dating Travis Alexander at the same period of time that you were either in a relationship with Mr. Alexander or having sexual intercourse with Mr. Alexander? Do you remember that?
Objection beyond scope. Lisa Andrews or Vietnam is not mentioned by the state.
Approach.
Jodi, before we go into some of these issues, if you'd be so kind as to tell us what your belief in terms of what being monogamous in a relationship means.
Well, in a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but to me it means that you're committed to that person. You're not, you're not with other people, sleeping with other people, or maybe there's kind of a gray area, but acting inappropriately with other people out of respect for your boyfriend or girlfriend.
I know you mentioned in your cross-examination that you were, I think your words were hyper-literal, right?
Yes.
Okay. In that regard, then, you just defined monogamy for us. What then to you does infidelity mean?
Infidelity I associate a little bit more with marriage, but in a committed relationship, infidelity can also mean if that person was unfaithful in that they pursued something with another person independent of the relationship that that person is in. I think in marriage it goes a little farther. It's more about in your mind and heart as well, not just your actions.
Okay. So let me ask you this then, as it relates to your relationship with Mr. Alexander. Per your definitions and your feeling then, would you have believed or assumed that at the time period that you and Mr. Alexander were boyfriend and girlfriend, that you would have been monogamous?
During that time period, yes, I believe that.
Okay. And during that time period then, had he been sexual with another woman, would you in your mind define that as an act of infidelity?
Objection lack of foundation. Sexual meaning sleeping with other people or acting inappropriately.
Sustained.
When you're Mr. Alexander, you and Mr. Alexander are a couple, if he kissed another girl, would that be an act of infidelity?
Well, if it's like a relative, no, but yeah, and if it's in a romantic way, of course, yes, I would consider that.
Okay. I should have been more clear with your hyperliteral personality, but let's go on then.
Object to the comment, and that's to be stricken.
Sustained.
Okay. So then if he had romantically kissed another girl, that would be infidelity. Would I be correct in assuming then if he engaged in other sexual acts, such as oral sex, that would be an act of infidelity when you were boyfriend or girlfriend? In your mind?
In my mind, yes, I would consider that infidelity.
And anything else of a sexual nature without going through every sexual act in the book, so to speak, that would also be an act of infidelity in your mind. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. So refresh our memory then as to the point in time when you were boyfriend and girlfriend. You were in a couplehood, if you will, with Mr. Alexander.
Did you say when?
When?
I would say February 2nd when we had the conversation to make things official, and that was 2007 until June 29th, 2007 when we broke up.
Okay. So during that time period, were you aware of any acts that you would define as infidelity?
I was not aware. Well, I had a feeling, but I didn't see.
Yeah, let's go to the question now. She said she was not aware.
Sustained.
Now, the discussion was held about Ryan Burns and you kissing Ryan Burns on June 4th, and that was brought up to whether or not you were being disloyal to Mr. Alexander, correct?
Yes.
Now, you weren't Mr. Alexander's girlfriend on June 4th of 2008, right?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. Were you aware of Mr. Alexander engaging in other sexual behavior at the same time, with other individuals at the same time that he was engaging in sexual behavior with you?
At what time period?
Any time period.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned, we've talked about the time when you went to his home in 2007 and saw him kissing another girl. That be one of those instances you're talking about?
Where he was with me and also with somebody else?
Yes.
Yes, like not in a committed relationship, but we were physical together in that regard.
Were there other instances of that sort of behavior that you were aware of with Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Describe those for us.
Well, there are things that I became aware of after the fact.
Okay.
So,
Objection is
Overruled. Next question.
So apart from this action that you saw in 2007, you're not aware of Mr. Alexander. At the time, you weren't aware of Mr. Alexander engaging in sexual behavior with anyone else but you and this girl. Is that accurate?
sexual, yes. I saw the romantic gestures, but not sexual.
Okay. In that regard, though, who is Chaitanya Lay?
Chaitanya Lay is a girl that Travis wanted to have a threesome with.
objection. Hearsay.
Approach, please. Actually, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 10-minute recess, since you did have a 15-minute recess about an hour ago. So 10 minutes, please be back in the designated area at 3:35. Please remember the admonition.